Manager for Google here in New York City. And today I'm going to be talking about something a little different, accessibility in maintenance and after you already build and design a space. So what I'm going to talk about in a little more detail today is something called an accessibility maintenance program and how we created it and how we keep it going throughout our building's life. And then also how to get people engaged in universal design and make sure that they stay engaged throughout the process, and some fun images and examples and best practices that we learned at Google. So before I jump into all the meat of the presentation, I want to explain a little bit about why I'm so passionate about universal design and why I do this work at Google. As you can see in these pictures, while I was in college, I injured my thumb playing soccer. And no, I know that you're not supposed to use your hands in soccer, but I was a goalie and the repetitive stress caused an injury to my thumb that the doctors just kept applying different splints for. So I switched from one splint to the next, And as I was doing this, I lived in a sorority house that was pretty old, and I realized that just this little disability caused havoc for me day to day. I couldn't open doors, I couldn't turn on the faucet, I couldn't put up my hair, really simple things that I took for granted before I got injured. And at the same time as I was injured, I happened to be taking a class called Diversity by Design. And in this class, I was introduced to the topic of universal design and designing spaces that help people. And so I'm learning about this, I'm experiencing my life in a new way, and I really fall in love with the concept of universal design and making sure that even if you're a young, healthy soccer player and you might get injured, and now you want all of your spaces to be designed to help you and make sure that you can get through your day-to-day life. So I graduate from college, I'm looking for a job, and I am lucky enough to land one at Google. And I think, as I'm starting my facilities management job at Google, how can I bring my passion for universal design into this job? And how do they really work together in this way? So I realized that at Google, I need to think about a project plan. It's not so easy to just come up with the idea and say, oh yes, everyone do universal design, and point them to those 7 principles and go on your way. So I found some like-minded Googlers who also were interested in not necessarily universal design, but accessibility and just improving the way we design our spaces. We created a cross-functional team. We called it the Accessibility Task Force, and we still work on it today. And we came up with 4 key goals that we wanted to achieve and kind of assigned each of us different goals. So one of them, which a lot of people will talk about today, is how do we design new spaces? So we're building a new building, we're designing a new floor. How do we come up with our Google standards or ideas that go above and beyond code? And we actually worked with John to do this as a consultant. So the idea of bringing people in, if you're not an expert, that's really what we relied on. The other one was, okay, we have all of these spaces that are already built. How do we make sure they are now meeting our standards? So we did an audit to get a sense of how much this would cost, because we all know that cost is a barrier, and what kind of the impact would be. And then the final 2 were the ones that I focused on, and honestly, they're the easiest ones to get done because they don't cost any money. Maintaining accessibility, so it kind of fell into my realm as a facilities manager. And then also education, which draws all of these circles together and makes sure that we get our message out about why it's so important to think about these things. So like I said, my task was really thinking about applying accessibility after people already move into a space through low to hopefully no cost impact, and something that we can make sure lives on as we go through our day-to-day life. So as I started thinking about this and looked around my building here in New York, I realized that once we move people into a space, even if we design it to be the most beautiful, wide hallways, people come into the equation and things start going down. People, as you can see in this picture, opening day, lovely new space in our campus here in New York, wide hallways, everything's great. 2 months later, people have moved in and they've made their impact, which is making it less accessible. So they move their cartons into the middle of the hall, they move their couches wherever they want. You might run into a giant teddy bear sitting in the hallway, you never know. So then I just got to thinking, how can we make sure that our spaces stay more like the picture to your left? And that led me to think about solving this problem. And the problem was more about scaling this, and I'm only one person in a sea of many, many facilities managers throughout the world. So I wanted to come up with a process and a way that people could follow along and do these maintenance exercises to make sure their spaces were accessible throughout their life. So I came up with something called a maintenance credit program. And I based this a little bit on the sustainability field, how they have LEED credits and things you can achieve. And I realized that, first of all, facilities managers at Google are type A personalities, and they like to compete. So why not give them a way to earn credits, earn points, that then they can compete against their other facilities managers to see who does the best job. To give you an idea of what these credits look like, I completely made all these up, just kind of winged it, and it's a work in progress all the time. But the idea is that you give someone a way to do simple things, but get recognized for them. So for example, in a lot of our offices, there's one way to get to, say, an event space or a cafe that's accessible. It has a ramp or it has a lift, but we don't have signs around our offices that indicate which way to go if you need to use those services. So a simple credit for a facilities manager is to make sure that you add signs around your office that point you to the most accessible route. And that costs nothing. You just print out a sign, laminate it, put it up on the wall. So we're trying to give people ways to feel like they're making a difference without really putting a big burden on them. So this kind of is a testament to how successful this was. In the past 12 months, throughout 30 different offices in the US and Latin America, we have completed 200 credits. And it really, as soon as I introduced this, people jumped on it. They were like, oh, that's easy, I'll do that, I'll get it done. And we continue to work with people to hear what the issues are in their offices and then work to develop new credits that they can use to solve those issues and then spread it. And then this year we're launching this in the European countries, and later we'll go into the Asia Pacific countries as well. So the idea of iterating, growing, that's really where we're looking at. So I wanted to show you a bit about what these credits look like in action. And something I want to stress is that I help to guide people to their decisions around how to make their spaces accessible without being too prescriptive. So that way people can make it fit the design of their local office. For example, you have a table that's built in, some tables that are more glass-like, and then a more rustic-looking table. And all of these work for the credit of adding a shelf or a table near an entryway, because a lot of our doors aren't auto openers, and that, obviously, as most of you know, costs a lot of money. So why don't we just take a little step forward, help people to put, not only people who might be using a cane or crutches, but you walk through our New York City office, you'll see people with a laptop, a drink, a snack, all sorts of things, and then they come to a door where they have to badge in. This shelf helps everyone. It doesn't just help someone who has a disability. Another credit that is probably the easiest one is we have facilities assistants that walk our floors every day. And one of the things we stress to them is to make sure as they're walking the floors, they keep the hallways clear. So all of that clutter you saw in the picture earlier, they put it somewhere else so that it's out of the way. And they look at things like our conference rooms. You can see those before and after pictures. And just things like moving tables back to where they should be. And overall, the idea is that they're already walking the floors. They're supposed to be cleaning up, but this really guides them and gives them a reason why they should be cleaning up. So we're going to ask you to do this, but here's the reason why. You're going to help someone from falling, from not being able to get through, all of these different reasons. And that leads me to my next point, which is to get people to buy into these things, what I've found is that you really need to explain the why behind what you're doing. So make them understand why moving chairs out of the way is so important, why all these things can help someone who's in a wheelchair or has different needs. And in New York City, we have scooters, which are great for getting from one avenue to another because we span a city block, but awful in terms of accessibility. So we have signs all around the campus that say, park your scooter, slow down, all of these things, but people don't listen, is what I've learned as a facilities manager, unless you tell them why you need them to listen. So we hold trainings where we teach people, look, you're gonna try now to get through the office in a wheelchair, see how hard it is, and all you have to do is just park your scooter or park someone else's scooter, And that can just make a small impact to make it more accessible throughout the day. So that's where we get into the education piece. We train both our Googlers as well as our facilities vendors because they're the first line that people interact with. And we train them not only about empathy and those small little things they can do day to day, but we also train them about bias busting. It's a term we use at Google a lot about making sure we identify the inherent biases that some people may have. And a lot of people have never interacted with someone with a disability. They feel very uncomfortable with it. So we work with our Googlers with disabilities to make sure that we understand both sides of the story and we have them both in the training so that there can be that interaction and that discussion and no question's a dumb question. We have a short online training. That way everyone's busy. If they just want to take 12 minutes and take it, they can. We also do it in person, like I said, and on a conference call for people who are remote. And the images below, I just want to point out, those are our members of our RUSE team. So I'm on the Real Estate Workplace Services team. And what we did was we had them live a day in the life or a couple hours in the life of someone with a disability. And this was before we were all getting together for a big summit. They all came back from this experience just totally enlightened and made them think every day as they walked through their offices or just all the things that we could do better as a facilities manager or a project executive, all of those ideas. And in one instance, someone was wearing the blindfold for the day, and they said at the end, "Oh, I'm so happy I'm able to take this off. It was so difficult." And then they realized that for someone who is blind, they don't have that option. And it really hit home to them to understand that, look, I need to make things easier for people day to day if we can. So that wraps up my talk, and I just want to leave you with a few ideas to think about whether you're designing a new space or you manage a space. If you want to keep it accessible after it already has opened, think about creating incentives for people to buy into this type of program and give them some guidelines on levels to meet. Maintain your space. Make sure that even after it opens, you're thinking about keeping it accessible and what that means. It could be as simple as a preventative maintenance program, as bland as that sounds, for your auto openers, because if they don't work, they're no use to anyone. And then educate. Like I said, we try not to just bark orders at people, but teach them the why as well as the how, so that that really gets them to think more and more about this. And just one other thing to point out, this picture here is a bridge that we recently built that I think is a great example of universal design, in that we integrated the ramp because it had to go a level change, and it just adds to the design. So like we were talking about earlier, it's an invisible design, but it's just, at least we're moving forward in some of our spaces. And thank you.